Hello, my people. Welcome to Beyond the Natural podcast show. Remember, if it isn't natural, it must be beyond the natural. Right away, won't you smash that like button, hit that share, and make sure you hit that notification bell if you haven't already. This is the time to do so now. You had plenty of time. I got that intro that pops up, and you know, it gives you time to make a decision, make quick decisions, fast, rash decisions. But let's get into today's topic. Why don't we? Why don't we? Why don't we? So today's topic is legends widespread. They talk about a race of giants. Have you heard about that? If you've been in Sunday school before, or if you have heard like different myths in different folk tales, if you have heard these stories, if you even seen these movies where they depict these giants, you know that they say that they once roamed the earth. In America, did you know that they were over, that there was over yeah, 1,500 newspaper accounts, 1,500 newspaper accounts, real newspaper accounts that said that there were over 3,700 skeletons of giants discovered across not only in my home state of Wisconsin, but in other parts of the United States. And my question to you today that I want you to think about, and I want you to start putting the full court press on a lot of these scientists and these Smithsonians and these anthropologists and all these other folks out here who claim to be experts in this area, who claim to know they thing about evolution and how things work in the making of this earth and how we got here and all of this. I want you to challenge them today and say, like, where is the evidence of these giants, of these skeletons that were dug up once upon a time? What have you done with them? Where are they? And was it a cover up? What are you trying to cover up? So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to get into it. Yeah. But before we get into it, let's shout out our sponsor. Shout out to North Bay Freight. If you want to get behind the big rig trucks, if you want to honk and drive from East Coast to the West Coast, and maybe you may find a giant skeleton along the way, and you got enough room to put that big sucker in the big. You can put that big old giant skeleton in the back of your brand new semi truck because North Bay Freight is hiring. They hiring. Yes, they are. They hiring. My friend out there on Twitch, he wants to know, do I still do weed? Yes. We don't call it weed though. I do CBD. I do CBD. So if you saw me on the Kinetic PE Mix show last week, that was CBD. Be careful. my federal PO might be watching. So, but that was CBD. I do CBD. But yeah, back to what I was saying about our sponsor, North Bay Freight. Check them out on Facebook and on Instagram at North Bay Freight. Shout out to them. And my friend on Twitch comes back and says, "Cool, in flames 911, 991. That is 991." So we're gonna be talking about giants today. Now I'm trying to figure out like why are they trying to cover this whole thing up? Okay. Now I'm gonna recommend a documentary. It's you can find it for free on YouTube. You don't need YouTube TV or anything like that. Go to YouTube. Just type in "A Race of Giants" documentary. You can put it in the Google too. It should come up. "A Race of Giants" documentary. I watched this documentary over the weekend, and I was astonished. This is the inspiration for today's particular episode, and it's going to be a short episode, by the way. I'm not going to make it very long. But I was astonished to find out that these Indian mounds, for so long, we've been fooled to think that like they was just putting Native American relics inside of these, and these were the remains of many of the Native Americans. But when you ask many of Native Americans what the hell they are, they don't even know what they are. You know why? Because these things are so prehistoric that like they are like pre some of the tribes that settled in some of these lands. They're prehistoric. They're old. They're old. Yes, old. And and if you were to start digging into these mounds, you will find that like most of them are empty. And there's a reason for that. Let me tell you why. Okay. So it started a little bit further than the account that I'm going to give, but it was first reported in about May 4th of 1912 in the New York Times. New York Times was very credible back then. You know, not a lot of fake news like today. You know, a lot of fake news nowadays, but back then the news was the news. Okay, stories published was verified. You know, because you probably had like just a little handful of people who could go out and they'd go out and verify these stories, collect these stories, and these little small towns, about 12 people. So but anyways, the New York Times, there was strange skulls coming up, and then 18 skeletons were found by the Peterson brothers on Lake Lawn farm in southwest Wisconsin. And they had some very freakish features to them, and then the heights of these skeletons ranged anywhere between 7.5 feet to about upwards in the amounts of 12 feet. These were pretty tall individuals, presumably those of man, and because they had the much larger heads of any race which inhabit America today, and they tend to have a double row of teeth, 6 fingers, 6 toes, and like humans, they came in different races too. So they were, they even came in different races. So they were different races. So that's pretty interesting. And then the teeth in the front of the jaw are regular molars, and then the heads usually found are elongated, which believed due to their longer than normal lifespan. So they also live longer than normal life. So you probably wondering to yourself like, hey, they could probably live twice the size of an average human today. And this really sounds like the giants of the Bible, in many other civilizations that depict these giants in history. And they had painted them on walls. But what do we get told all the time? Oh, that's just fairy tale. It's just myth. It's mythology. It's it's legend. There's no account about that. But here we are, back in time. We go back and take a tiny trip back in time to 1912, where the New York Times reported 18 skeletons of different races with 6 fingers, 6 toes, elongated heads. These individuals ranging between the heights of 7.5 feet to 10 feet. Okay? These were giants. Okay? These were the giants that the Bible in the Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 were talking about. Okay? This is what they were talking about. Now, to any scientists out here, it sounds like faulty logic. How could this be so? Because why would we want to use religious and cultural history to fill in a hole in science? We already got our whole, we derived from caveman, evolved from monkey theory. We already got our little, pictures of like how man evolved. This whole spin out of a race of giants doesn't even make sense. And you know what National Geographic do? Okay, so National Geographic, now before I tell you what they did, now National Geographic, they tend to sign off on this type of stuff, right? You would think. they tend to sign off. You think they sign off on this type of stuff. So like, okay, before I tell you what they did, so they did 2002 National Geographic. They reported that Cyclops skeletons were found too in Greece. So and these people stood about 12 to 15 and a half feet tall. That sounds very giant to me, don't it? That is 3 humans put together, okay? And one eye socket. And the crazy part about this, if most of them had the double rows of teeth, which typically means that they were man eaters. They were cannibals. And so the reason why this really makes a difference, because like, okay, if you tie it into politics today, right? Like, why is this not important? Why would it not be important? Okay, why would especially since now, like, they start to tell the truth about UFOs. But when you go to any museum, or even if you go to the Smithsonian, you can't find the evidence that they found more than a century ago. Because it's all destroyed. That's why what we come to find out is that they start destroying this stuff. Even the evidence that they found in 2002, not that long ago. So the National Geographic found skeletons in Greece, and that stuff got destroyed because 2017, you fast forward, National Geographic put out an article that says, bunch of halts going around, and this whole idea of giants roaming Earth is just not true. Not verifiable. Why would they double back on something that they went out personally and verified, and they had their own researchers, and like National Geographic, they're pretty thorough. They seem pretty credible. Must have been some pressure. So if we go back to if we go even back farther to 1891, the New York Times reported that scientists from the Smithsonian Institution had discovered several large pyramidal monuments on Lake Mills near Madison, Wisconsin. Madison was in ancient days the center of a population numbering not less than 200,000. The people who dug up everything found out that there was an elaborate defensive system in works. So the assumption is that there was an encounter all the time between the Native Americans that were there and these giants, and so they had to build different defensive systems against these giants to fight them. So this is why you find several burial mounds around the areas where these Native Americans used to dwell. So and then this whole giant skulls and skeletons of a race of Goliaths have been found on a regular basis. Okay, especially in the Midwest states for more than 100 years. So they've been finding them for 100 years. Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, and New York. And they are similar to the well-known mounds of the mound builder people, that was once rumored. So the mound builder people, their history span a period of more than 5,000 years, so like from 3,400 BCE to 16 CE, a period greater than the history of ancient Egypt and all of the other dynasties. So why would the Great Smithsonian want to cover this up? Again, it's, to me, it seems like it's been a deliberate effort to 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 hide the telling of the bones and to keep the giant skeletons locked away somewhere. Which a lot of them has been rumored to be destroyed or thrown off oceans to the middle of the ocean somewhere. Um, it's beyond you know mind blowing to me that they're locking these giant skeletons away and depriving the public of these findings. Um, I mean, but when there's like credible sources out there that verify that, like, hey, this evidence was found, like even in a lot of these old articles, there's pictures of them. Um, so there's even some people that's they're still around. Well, they're very old now. Um, but their grandchildren got the stories passed to them of the accounts of them being encountering these skeletons. So like these people are not lying, and like surely the pictures are not can't be made up. Especially during that time, and when been pretty hard to Photoshop back in 1912, and then 2002, like National Geographic themselves went out and did their own collection of these things, and here you get the Smithsonian come and just snatch the stuff up, like, so very similar to what they were doing in Area 51 and still doing in Area 51. We don't know what the hell's going on in Area 51, and what the government's been doing all along with the UFOs, and and just not revealing us secrets. And this is why we should be very wary of our government, and why we should always challenge and always question our government, and always ask questions, ask questions when like we don't understand stuff, like we should be calling our local aldermen. We should be calling our local state representatives. We should be calling our mayor's office. We should be calling our senators and House representatives, and even call the doggone president's office or send a letter, for that matter, and ask questions, because like these people are supposed to serve you, but yet they sit on all of this confidential information and refuse to let it run free. And then these institutions that gets backed, by federal funding, or they get all this private money, and they house all of these secrets. They too need to be held accountable, and we need to be standing 10 toes down in front of their offices, asking, what is it that you got to hide? What are you so afraid of? And to me, it seems like they're afraid to be proven wrong. That like, hey, that this earth is more complex than what we know. That this life is more complex than what we know. So, hey, that's my challenge to you guys. That's your homework. Go out and go raise some hell. So that's all I got for you today. What do you think about the race of giants? Do you think it's true? And if so, do you think that that it's possible that some of the tall people that we know of today, some of these NBA players that we see today, could be remnants of the DNA that's left over from some of those race of giants? Who knows, right? So maybe that that DNA could have got mixed in somehow. Maybe a giant was shacking up with one of those other humans, and got some DNA mixed up in there, and that gene, not everybody gets that giant gene. I know I got a couple of relatives that's like strangely taller than me, and and I always question, like, hey man, how did you get so tall? Because they got that giant gene. I think we all got a little bit of that giant gene in us somewhere. So, again, this is a lost race of a human species that and we need to get down to the bottom of this. Like, we need to get down to the bottom of a lot of stuff. This is the only place where you're gonna get this type of conversation. on the Beyond the Natural podcast. As always, you can go to the Beyond the Natural podcast on YouTube, visit it there, and check out some of our previous episodes. Or if you like to listen through the ear, you can listen through the ear on any podcast app, whatever your favorite podcast or music app is, whether it be Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, however you listen. You can check it out there. Just simply type in Beyond the Natural podcast. We'll pop right on up for you. Visit us next time for another episode. We do this every week, once a week. We got brand new episodes for you. I might be coming out. Matter of fact, here's a little secret. I might be coming out with something brand new for you. I might be giving you something extra during the week. I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but be on the lookout for that. Till next time, many blessings, peace, and lots of love. I'm your host, Marcus Hart.